Hello, I'm Alexandra Sleator, Career Accelerator. And that means that working together, you will get to achieve your career objectives faster than you would on your own. Together we can address a wide range of career challenges. For instance, we can of course help you progress your career. And that would mean, for example, devising a promotion strategy that ensures that you win that progress that you richly deserve. We can also help you to repackage your skills so that you can make a bid for a different role. We can help you with your career right here, right now, and that means really polishing some of those fundamental skills which help us to be effective in the office. And that can be communication, influencing type of skills, but also managing conflict, for example, or helping you making that transition from manager to leader, or deepening that leadership presence, and something also like embracing diversity or presenting with confidence. All sorts of elements around your life at the office to make you both happier with it and more effective. And last but by no means least, another kind of career challenge that we can work together on is redefining success. And that can make sense either because you've been on a career break and you want to rejoin the workforce, or because you're ready to look at something vastly different, in not just a different job, but literally maybe in a different industry. And so that's another type of work we can do together. The point is that no matter what your challenge, working together you will get to achieve your aspirations in a time and cost efficient way. So welcome to edition number 6 of Career Tips for 2014. In the beginning of the year we started a series around getting things done in 2014. And so the first chapter was around setting goals that will motivate us to keep working on them and achieve them during this year. Then we looked at what can go wrong, and that was a discussion on blind spots. Then we looked at how to help ourselves by looking at techniques for personal effectiveness. And then the fourth chapter was around strengths, how to identify them and how to play better to them. So that was chapter 4. And then we took a break last month because I shared with you a career transition webinar that hopefully was also of value for those of you who are thinking of taking a career step. And so here we'll resume that series around getting things done, and in fact we close it with the 5th chapter. And really what we're going to talk about today is motivation. Because what underpins any form of achievement is motivation. And goals have to do with motivation. If goals are not motivating, you will not even bother with them. Blind spots can as well as strengths, as well as personal effectiveness techniques, are all enhanced in the presence of motivation, whereas of course they are very much undermined when we are demotivated. So in this concluding chapter on this series of getting things done, we are looking at motivation. What is it anyway? How does it work? But then of course conversely, what happens when we get motivated? What does that look like? So to kick off, what is motivation anyway indeed? And so here let me propose the following definition of motivation as energy. And in fact, in my mind, it's 4 types of energy. The first energy is the one to kick off, to get going, start working on that goal of yours, whether it's personal or professional. Second energy is that directive force that keeps you moving forward because you have the pull from that vision of your goal, what it's going to be like when you get there, the benefits you're going to reap. That directive force is a little bit the organizational bit of motivation because it's knowing what step to take and in which order to get to your goal. Then there is the drive to persevere, that resilience that we need to be able to demonstrate in the face of setbacks and obstacles that will be hopefully not too much, but that may pop up on the way to achieving your goal. And last, but by again no means least, the strength to maintain, in particular to maintain a certain behavior in order to make sure that once you've reached your goal, well, you do not lose it, that you don't step back, that you don't slip back. Now, this maintenance element of energy is not always needed. If we think of a corporate environment, it could be that once you've completed a report and you've handed in, well, there's not much else that needs to happen after that. But of course, with more personal goals like quitting smoking or losing weight, we know that there's a behavior that will ensure that we don't put the weight back on or that we don't resume smoking again. So the strength to maintain is obviously part of motivation in a lot of instances. So as you were just listening to me sharing that, did that resonate? Does that make sense? When you start thinking about your own experiences of working towards goals and what worked well and what worked less well, can you pinpoint these various energies at work? And can you in particular identify which one is for you the hardest? We all know that for some people it is hard to get going, but once they do, they stay motivated and they finish nicely. So it's that kickoff phase that's the hurdle. For others, kickoff is really easy, but then they stall along the way. And that's an issue with either the directive force, where they get lost, they don't know where next to go, or an issue with the resilience aspect. They cannot find the energy to continue long enough to get to their goal. And last but not least, again, we know that for many of us, the strength to maintain is a huge challenge because we get there, we've lost the weight, we've quit smoking, and then we find ourselves piling on the pounds again. So all of these challenges that go on. And they will be varied across situations, but as you listen to me, let me encourage you to maybe have a think of which one of these energies is possibly for you. The one that's typically more challenging, more frequently the problem. And of course, this is career tips, so let's think about the corporate environment. We will be equally challenged by professional and personal goals, but when we are in the office, and especially as managers, we will have staff members that may struggle with their work. And so it is important to notice the one that has typically an issue with kicking off versus the other individual that has a different kind of problem. And in fact, I hope that by the end of this video, you will be equipped with how to engage with people around their motivational challenges. Of course, it's helpful for you. You can have your own self-dialogue around what's going on with me that I'm struggling, but indeed, elements of a conversation also in the workplace. So if I'm correct, and motivation can indeed really make sense as these series of energies, I even want to propose to you, and this is the graph that's going to appear on your screen, that motivation can be viewed as a journey. And so you have a motivational continuum with various phases in there. And it's interesting to identify which phase, if any, is one that seems to be a more recurring challenge. And the other dimension now that I want to introduce around motivation is one of internal versus external. And what I mean here is that some of us get motivated very much in a self-directed way, whereas some of us get more motivated through external influences. So let's use a very simple example to illustrate. Think of a lady who wants to lose weight. It could be that her reason for doing that is because she's becoming aware that putting on all this weight is not very good for her health, or a more short-term goal like fitting into her wedding dress or some sort of a nice dress for a nice occasion, and right now she's just not fitting in anymore. So those are very personally resonant reasons, and so her decision is internally driven. Conversely, she could be pondering the idea of going on a weight loss program because her boyfriend has made a comment that she seems to be putting on weight, and he didn't seem particularly enthused by that. So that would be clearly an external reason, an external driver of her motivation. And in fact, sometimes our drivers are a mix of both internal and external, and the bigger the better. The more drivers we have, the better, because again, those drivers will help us kick off, stay engaged, keep being resilient, and then of course maintain, if that makes sense. So again, take the time as we go through this video to think, well, okay, so now that I'm thinking about my motivational challenges, I have a sense of the phase of that motivational continuum, which is more the one that I struggle with if I remember the past, and also I'm also noticing that I tend to be more internally driven or more externally driven. So have a think about that. And then again, bringing it back into the corporate world, you will have noticed, I'm sure as managers, that some of your colleagues are quite internally driven. They won't take on a piece of work that they can't personally buy into, whereas others are much more amenable to operating along other people's reasons, and those are the external, more externally driven folks. And clearly, what we can see is going on here as we discuss that, is that if we're going to have a problem with motivation, understanding the phase, the kind of energy that's faltering and that's provoking the demotivation problem, understanding the internal or external dimension of motivation for the person who is experiencing that challenge will be fundamental to articulating the right kind of solution to get out of that demotivation pit that we sometimes find ourselves, or that, you know, our colleagues can find ourselves in as well. And so indeed, what is demotivation? That's the time to ask this question, surely. And so let me propose that demotivation happens for 3 reasons. It can happen either because of resource depletion, and I will explain that in a minute, so not to worry. Because of goal conflict, that's the second option, or because of inadequate tracking. So I know this is not obviously clear straight away. So actually, we will use examples to illustrate that in a minute. But if indeed I am correct again, and there are really 3 reasons why we get demotivated, and there are, as I proposed to you earlier, 4 phases, 4 elements to motivation, what we can do is bring these 2 elements, the elements of the phases of motivation and the elements of the 3 reasons why we get demotivated, and combine them to create a matrix, which is now appearing on your screen, that creates an inventory, and it's a 4x3 table, as you can see, and that captures in fact 12 kinds of motivational problems. So to bring this material to life, let's look at some examples, and the table with the 12 problems will reappear as I talk to enable you to hopefully connect to that material. Example number 1. We are in the workplace, and here this is a manager who notices that one of their staff members is indeed struggling to get started with a piece of work they've delegated to them. The question here around which phase are we looking at is simple to answer. It is clearly a kickoff challenge. And so now that we're in the kickoff phase, we need to understand which of those 3 reasons is at play. Is it an issue of resource depletion? Is it an issue of goal conflict? Or is it an issue of inadequate tracking? Now, we often notice that people who struggle to make a start on a work project may exhibit some challenges around organizing themselves. You know, they struggle to create an outline for a presentation or a report, or just to work out the steps that they need in order to complete the task. And that is a skill gap around planning and organization, and that, as you see, is captured in that 3rd reason of inadequate tracking. So that what could be going on. And indeed, you can engage the team member to say, you know, I'm noticing you're not making a start. You know, are you struggling to organize yourself? And they could say yes, or they could say no. And of course, if they say yes, then you can say, well, how can we help you get organized? And you're having that right conversation to address the motivational challenge appropriately and helpfully for that person. But it could be something else, and we could have a resource depletion. Now, resource depletion means that there is not the right resource in play. And of course, the right resources in play could be about the person themselves or about the environment. So you see again on that table that in in the little cell that corresponds to the kickoff phase with the resource depletion reason, you can have an issue of a skill gap. The person is lacking a competency. That means they can't do the task, so of course they can't get started. There could be also something around the environment, and that's why I call it lack of infrastructure, that's preventing them from getting started. And in a work context, you can imagine that maybe there is something that's missing IT process-wise that could be hindering the person from getting, getting started on their project. So that would be an example of the resource depletion. And last but not least is that goal conflict possibility. And I'll illustrate it actually with a different example that came very recently into a coaching conversation. I was talking one of my clients, a manager, and he was commenting that he had asked one of his team members to do something and the person strictly refused. Which was a very uncollaborative and very surprising behavior in that sense for that person. And the individual who refused to do the task said that they didn't want to be a bad guy. Well, that's clearly because the task is conflicting with some of their values and behaviors, and that's where we get this very odd language around I don't want to be a bad guy. So this is not an issue of somebody who can't, which would be the resource depletion, or who is struggling with organization planning, which is the inadequate tracking reason. This is somebody who feels conflicted around that task, and that's the goal conflict type of reason that can help explain why somebody is simply not making the start that you would expect them to. So I hope that this first example around challenges in that phase of kickoff help you to understand how to use that matrix of the 12 motivational challenges and how to use it to frame conversations in the workplace with colleagues. Now, let's look at another example to continue working through and illustrating that material around demotivation. And here the second example is about you. And it's about you who is struggling to progress on a project of yours around quitting smoking. So in terms of the phase, it's not the kickoff because you have quit smoking. You're in that phase of using patches or e-cigarettes or what have you. You're in that journey. And you're not, of course, at the maintenance phase, which is going to be relevant for your project because you haven't gotten to the moment where you can say, I'm no longer a smoker, and you need to maintain that. So which phase are we dealing with then? Is that the one of direction, or is it the one of perseverance? It could be a little bit difficult to figure out. So again, let's go and ask ourselves some questions around the theme of resource depletion, goal conflict, or inadequate tracking. Now, with the issue of resource depletion, if it's a sense of direction that's going to be to turn out to be the problem, what you will find as you think through what's going on for you is that you underestimated the ask. Quitting smoking is a big ask, and indeed, what there we have is an underestimation of requirements, the requirements of what it will take for you to indeed be able to become that non-smoker. So that's the directive force here that's taking a hit. If in fact it was not a question that you had underestimated requirement, but that you in fact turn out to have more limited coping abilities than you realize, then we're more in that resilience challenge than in the direction challenge. But what we are clearly in is a sense of resource depletion, and so it's going to be about adding resources to yourself. How can you help yourself have either more of what it takes to stay focused and continue working on the goal? Another example of what goal conflict could look like in a project like that. For example, what you come to notice is that when you smoke, you calm down. And indeed, we all know that tobacco has a calming effect. Now, if you work in a very stressful environment, it could be that your regular cigarette breaks have a huge impact because this calming effect is highly valuable for you. So here it turns out that not smoking is taking away that calming effect, which is valuable, and so you have a conflict because the cigarette, while being unhealthy, is having this positive calming effect, which once removed is creating another source of challenge for you. And so indeed you need to address that conflict in terms of goals. You need to find something else that you can substitute and that will bring you this calming effect that the cigarette was responsible for. Because until you have taken care of that calming effect, you will remain conflicted. Should I smoke? Should I not smoke? I know it's unhealthy, but it's very calming. That's the conflict. So again, I hope that looking at these examples, and let me encourage you to ponder that table that I shared with you with the 12 motivational challenges, gives you a sense of the inner dialogue that you could have with yourself around your challenges, again, whether they're work related or more personal, and indeed in the workplace to engage with others, colleagues, but even more so as a manager, seeking to maintain motivation in their team. What sort of conversations can you have to identify with folks what's really going on for them when they appear to be struggling with something around motivation, and therefore be in a position to articulate the helpful remedy that will powerfully address the motivation challenge and get them back on track. So there you have it. A few thoughts on the motivation, what it is, the energy of motivation, the internal or external dimension of motivation, how motivation works when it works, and of course what happens, what doesn't work anymore when it fades. And I hope that looking at goal, conflict, resource depletion, inadequate tracking has helped you formulate a strategy to address your motivational challenges as well as those of others around you, especially in the office if you're a manager. I would love, as always, to hear your thoughts. Do you find those tips helpful, relevant? Do you have others that you might share with us? That would be wonderful. And of course, if you wanted to talk to me a bit more about motivation, please feel free to email me, and my address, of course, is appearing on the screen right now. So this concludes that series in sort of 5 chapters around getting things done in 2014, and I'll be talking to you next month on an altogether different topic, and I'll keep that a surprise. Thank you so much for watching. Very best wishes around motivation and making the progress you want in 2014. Take good care. Bye bye, and thank you.